Good day. I'm here with Pedro Crous. I know Pedro, of course, for many years, and it's really a pleasure to interview him about his career, where he's coming from, and his view on mycology. So, Pedro, start. When were you, or where were you born, and how did you come to mycology?
Oh gosh, so I'm originally from South Africa. I was born in Ceres in the Western Cape, and after school I went to study at the University of Stellenbosch, and my first degree was a forestry degree because I wanted to do something green, and we had some practical where I had to dissect a frog. And I decided it's definitely not medicine. I'm sticking to the green part of biology.
It was a green frog.
No, it was a green frog, a dirty frog. But yeah, so that didn't work. So I studied forestry, and then the first practical I had as a forestry student, I knew that this is not for me. You know, this is really boring. I'm not into this. But I also then didn't know what I was going to do. So one day I was sitting. I remember I was surfing all morning, and so I was really tired, had a late night of parties. So I was sleeping in the class, and then this guy came in who just got his PhD in America, in Minnesota, and it was Mike Wingfield. And he started lecturing on forest pathology. Halfway through the lecture I woke up and I saw all these fungal images, and I thought, good God, you know, this is amazing stuff. And I specifically remember the fungus. It was Rhizina undulata, which you get around the pine forest if there was a fire. And I was looking at this and I thought, wow. So after the lecture, I went to him and I said, you know, Dr. Wingfield, I want to do this. So he said, no, you must first finish your degree. So I had another 2-3 years because I was second year then. And after that, I could go to him. And then I could start a career as forest mycologist or forest pathologist, actually.
And that was still in Stellenbosch?
It was still in Stellenbosch.
Okay.
Mike was working at a Plant Protection Research Institute, and I had exactly this much bench space in one of his labs where I could work. And there was, of course, no money. So he used to go on trips all over, and when he came back, he collected leaves of different trees. So I started working on foliar pathogens of trees, and I'm still doing that.
So how many years ago was that?
Oh, that was in 83.
83.
Yeah.
So it's 25 years ago or more than that.
Yeah, a long time.
So, yeah, I'm always impressed that you're still what I call a very traditional mycologist. You collect and then you start isolating. You go with your binocular and look where it is and so on. I think that work is hardly done anymore in mycology, or do you think that's...
Well,
I think it's very unique that you have a fungus and then you start with the DNA, and many people just start with the DNA and do not look to the fungus.
Well, what's fortunate in my case is that I'm now working at the Westerdijk Institute, Fungal Biodiversity Institute in the Netherlands, which has got this massive culture collection. So it fits into the vision of the institute to get all these diverse species into the collection. So I think if I were to have worked at a university where I had to do a specific project, it would have been far more difficult to do this species discovery kind of work. But it fits in our mission, and as you know, there's just millions of species out there, and they need to be cultured and they need to be preserved so that they can be used for the benefit of humanity. So I think within that niche I'm very comfortable, and it's very fortunate that I'm able to do this. It's a real privilege, and it's truly incredible. I really love it.
But yes, I think both we think it's still important to do this, but there are many mycologists saying, well, that's old stuff, you know, you should really go only for the DNA or pyrosequencing and all the metagenomics. I believe that we still owe the society to describe species and to find them and monograph them. I think this is still important, but I see also that it's becoming very difficult. In our place where we are working in the Westerdijk Institute, that's possible, but in other places like in the United States, I think they are not really the same mycology as we do in Holland, isn't it?
No, there's a big difference, but I think we need to have the balance between species discovery and understanding species processes. So there many people, many of colleagues that are here at this meeting will probably spend their whole career working on a species or on an aspect of a species. So there also needs to be people that puts this taxon into a larger perspective. Just this morning I was listening to some amazing talks about fungal pathogens with different populations, and they're producing different toxins, they're doing different things, but when you see the phylogenetic trees, you know that these are different species. But because these people come from a more plant pathological perspective, they think that it's one big diverse population which is specialized to different hosts. So there's a real need for a collaborative approach between the, let's say, traditional mycologists or the phylogeneticists and the more plant pathological or applied fungal biologists. And together I think it makes the whole picture. Individually it would be a big waste, and one would never get to the answer of how it all ties together.
Yeah, well finding and working on the biodiversity, particularly with cultures and so, you agree also that the Nagoya Protocol really is a difficult issue for us, isn't it?
I was just at lunch now discussing with Bevan Weir from New Zealand, and New Zealand didn't sign the Nagoya Protocol, but they're getting lots of cultures in that were collected in countries that did sign the protocol. This is a huge hurdle for collaboration and for research. As you know, we also have this citizen science project working on isolating fungi from soil and then describing and naming these fungi after the kids that collected the soil samples. And we want to take this project globally. And the big hurdle is that in many of these countries, Nagoya will make it impossible to do this work in a collaborative fashion. So I think it's a real pity. Obviously, there must be protection for revenues of biodiversity for the specific countries, but it shouldn't be as it is now, where it inhibits collaboration and just basic research.
But don't you think that the benefits, or particularly the financial benefits for all the fungi is not very well overestimated? Because you find a fungus which is beautiful and probably has no real properties for biotechnology, and many of those are these kind of fungi. And therefore, yes, I believe that many countries are really prohibiting, let's say, more research in biodiversity because they believe that every fungus is gold, which I don't believe.
No, that's a real issue. The next big hurdle is going to be DNA, because now they want to include that in Nagoya as well, which would make any kind of phylogenetic research almost impossible to do. So I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, a lot of developing countries see this as a potential cash crop. And again, I believe that there should be a benefit sharing, but it should be in a way that it doesn't hinder normal research to understand the biodiversity that we have on the planet. And there lies the uneasy balance.
Yeah, you were just mentioning the Citizen Project, and I think it was a very good initiative you did in Holland. Maybe you can explain a little bit more how we did this and what kind of impact it had, because it had a big impact.
It had a tremendous impact. So basically this is linked to a museum, and the next museum we will do this with will be Micropia, and basically groups of school children come to the museum and then they get a kit which consists of 2 test tubes. They take this home and they basically collect soil in their gardens. This soil is then sent back via airmail to the institute. We isolate the fungi, and if they're new species, we describe it after the kids. Obviously, these fungi could then also still be used. Some of them may produce an interesting metabolite that can be useful, maybe a new antibiotic, who knows, but they're in the collection, they're preserved for prosperity. But the children are incredibly excited by this, having your own fungus, a fungus that's named after you for something that you collected in your garden. This is actually quite interesting. So now we were a bit shocked finding so many new species in the Netherlands, because we had Walter Gams there and he looked extensively at Dutch soils and thought that it's all done. Well, it's not. There is a lot of new things, and I think it's like that the world over. So next we want to, in 2019, extrapolate this to the Dutch islands, and then we want to, in 2020, take this globally, where we can get permission from this Nagoya permits, etc. But then in the build up to the IMC 12 in Amsterdam in 2022, I can see the podium with children from various countries all over the world, and we'll fly them in, just one representative per country, and this will be linked to a bigger symposium in their home countries where all the kids will get their certificates and the fungi named after them. So I think this will be a really big press moment, that you can be there on the stage and there will be kids from, say, Kenya and New Zealand and Madagascar and whatever, next to a kid from Canada, and they all have their new species and wondering whose fungus has got the magic bullet.
Yeah.
You know, so
but it's important that you bring mycology to the children, and they start really, let's say, enthusiastic about this field and maybe are interested to do the study, because there is not really, particularly in Holland, not very many mycology students. So maybe that will really influence.
It's true. Look, mycology as a discipline is not being taught in many countries of the world, but we are using the fungi as a vehicle to expose children to biology. And many of these children may one day choose for a career in biology, whatever they end up doing. It need not be with fungi, but the fungi are the vehicle, and this is really great because they become ambassadors to understand biodiversity on the planet and to protect the world as we know it. So I think there's a much bigger message in all of this, and the benefits for humanity are there for all to enjoy afterwards. So it's really great.
I remember that also the president of the academy sent a sample from her garden, and you found a new species in her garden, isn't it?
When we started the project, the president of the Royal Dutch Academy of Arts and Science, Josie van Dijk, started the initiative with a sample from her garden in Amsterdam. And I know that Josie van Dijk, her hero in life, her idol, is Johanna Westerdijk, to which we named the institute after Johanna Westerdijk. And Westerdijk has a genus called Westerdijkella, which was described from soil collected in Mozambique by a Dutch mycologist, Harry Swart, who later became the mycologist in Melbourne in Australia. But so with Josie van Dijk, she's now got Westerdijkella and as a new genus in her soil, and it's also a new family. So who would have thought this in her garden in Amsterdam? And what I didn't tell her is that there's many more species in her soil. So hopefully this year we'll get to naming them as well. So incredible biodiversity.
Well, you're mentioning all the, let's say, the relation with South Africa. You're from South Africa yourself. In the meantime, you got the Dutch citizenship. But I think that the relation between the Westerdijk Institute and South Africa was really intense in, let's say, particularly in the 70s and the 80s, isn't it? And before, in fact, because Westerdijk also sent her students or her postdocs.
I was actually in South Africa a month ago, and I took several posters to South Africa of the Westerdijk family tree. And this family tree is all her PhD students. So she had 56 PhDs, and these students again had PhDs. So there's a whole family hierarchy. And One of these was Susara Truter, who after the Second World War went back to South Africa, and she became the first female dean of agriculture in the world. But she became professor, dean and head of department of microbiology, and she had lots of PhDs who again got PhDs. And these, many of them are now professor at the University of Pretoria, the University of the Free State, University of Natal, University of Stellenbosch, and all of them are having students again. So actually the Westerdijk family tree is growing faster in South Africa than it is in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So it's truly global.
It's funny. I just had an interview with Mike Wingfield, and I asked him about the future of the mycology in South Africa. He said, "Well, there are many new people which in fact were from this professor from Westerdijk, but he said it is also remarkable that internationally we all work together, the South African." And we are producing like hell. Don't you think that is really a remarkable development in mycology?
It truly is. So I think this year Clavariate Analysis produced the first analysis of universities globally rated according to discipline. And in the field of mycology, the University of Pretoria, where Mike Wingfield is rated number 2 in the world.
Whoa.
And I think Wageningen was number 3 and Utrecht was number 5. So the Dutch heritage is massive internationally. And most or much of this can be traced back again to Westerdijk and the legacy of one woman and a will to work on fungi. It's truly amazing.
It's already a few years ago that you came to Holland. Did you regret something that you came to Holland? The weather maybe, or?
I miss the weather from Africa, and I miss real mountains. That I regret. But for the rest, I think it's a wonderful place to live, and it's an incredible place for research. So that has been really good. And one can have ample trips to Africa and other countries where one can collect amazing biodiversity. But as we've seen with citizen science, there's even a lot of biodiversity in the Netherlands waiting to be described.
In fact, we are here at IMC 11, and you are going to, or you have already started IMC 12 in Amsterdam. Can you say something about your plans with this Congress?
Well, IMC 12 will be in 2022 in the Rai, and the theme is from biodiversity to applications. It's going to be a massive meeting. We reckon it's probably going to be one of the largest, if not the largest IMC ever.
Why do you think that?
Because we will have more workshops than have ever been planned at any IMC. And a lot of these people come to this meeting not only for the lectures, but specifically for the added value. Really qualitative, great focused workshops on various aspects in biodiversity, in food, in health, in industry, and we are already planning how to do this and to place this as pre and post conference workshop. So I think we will have a massive interest for this. We will also have more money for student bursaries than any Congress had before. So we're going to bring in lots of students from developing countries. We'll work on getting cheaper accommodation, etc. So I think we've got the cornerstones of a really successful meeting.
So we also give the opportunity to a lot of students to give oral presentation rather than posters. And this is important.
I think so. We have realized that in many countries students can only get permission to attend if they can actually talk. So we'll try and be creative with the program, maybe going for shorter talks but more talks so that more students can get the chance to be exposed to the scientific community.
So I think I will end this conversation about publications, because we both know that publication is very important. But I see that there are problems. You can fight with impact factors, and then you see that many journals are in fact rejecting papers because it's just only species or genus description. You have just established a new journal. Why is that? Why did you establish that journal?
Well, we just established FUSE, Fungal Systematics and Evolution, specifically aimed at data release papers. But in our case, these data release papers are new species descriptions. We find that in many cases that people collect species and there's not a specific story behind it. They have it and they knew and they need to be published and released to the community. And many journals do not want to do this because they think the paper will not be highly cited. And then the researchers don't publish the species. So we want to provide an easy platform to enable them to do this, because I think that many of these species will end up being valuable in any case, and the papers will get cited. So I am not worried at all about impact factor. Biodiversity takes care of that itself, and as long as there's good standards and the taxa are described in the best gold standard techniques of the day, it will all take care of itself. But we need to lower the hurdle for species discovery and publication.
Yeah. What do you think about the topic biodiversity in this Congress? Do you think there should be more biodiversity? You like to do it in Amsterdam, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Well, we think that biodiversity is one of the 5 themes in the IMC Congress. And the IMC Congresses are always balanced because they cover all aspects of fungal biology. So, but when the Congress is, say, in Asia, like it was in Thailand in 2014, then biodiversity has a more impetus than here in Puerto Rico, because of the Congress priorities organized by the Mycological Society of America. They're more into metagenomics, so biodiversity, but in a different perspective than what you would have, say, in Asia or what you would have in Europe.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we both worked at the Westerdijk Institute. I still, in my head, call it CBS.
CBS, yeah.
I had a great career there, 48 years. So, how do you see the future of our institute?
I think that the future of the institute is better than ever before, because we have a balance between groups that are doing biodiversity discovery and that are doing more applied research. And the Institute is more relevant than ever before in the niches agriculture, health and industry. And there's very strong financial support from these industries, and other than this, the relevance of what we do. The relevance is so incredible to all these sectors that it's so easy to justify the Institute, what it is and what it stands for. We are now going to invest more heavily in certain areas, for instance, clinical diagnostics. I just heard this week that the new hospitals that are being built around the Institute will be establishing clinical mycology groups. So these groups will link to those in the Institute, and the whole hub will be far stronger. This is something we would never have dreamt of 10 years ago, but because of the relevance, because of the new types of treatments, and the immune system gets suppressed, and the fungi are becoming much more important. Resistance to fungicides, new infections, untreated infections. So the fungi are really very important and will be getting more attention in years to come.
Yeah, and we are lucky that we are in the Netherlands with all these institutes, the network. I think that let's say networking and cooperation within Netherlands is excellent, and of course we are fully supported by the academy, and I think that's also important. If you see all the problems in other institutions now in Denmark and so on, they have really big problems to get money, but I'm very happy that you are now in an institute which is really seeing a very bright future.
Yes, I think so. I think as long as you stay to what you do and do that to the best of your ability, and you link that to relevance, you will be okay regardless of where you are in the world.
Okay. Thank you, Pedro, for
Thank
this
you,
nice
Rob.
congress.
Okay.